a firm deal as of yet. And take a listen to President Obama back in December of 2013 about these secret facilities, one of them in a mountain.
We know that they don't need to have a underground fortified facility like Fordo in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They certainly don't need a heavy water reactor at Iraq in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They don't need some of the advanced centrifuges that they currently possess in order to have a limited, peaceful nuclear program.
Well, those things will stick around in different forms, but they'll all be there. Let's bring in our panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, you could see what happened today by the jubilation in the face of the Iranian foreign minister when he announced what had been agreed to. The bottom line are two things. Iran has promised a total lifting of sanctions. That's UN, EU, United States, everywhere. We're not sure about the timing, but it could be as early as June. And that will supercharge the Iranian economy, will strengthen the regime, will give it tens of billions of dollars, with which not only to build its nuclear facilities, but to use for the proxy wars around the Middle East. That's number one. It gets its economy back. And
well, let me just interrupt you. The administration says it doesn't happen until it passes a threshold. In other words, they meet the requirements, then the sanctions get.
They were completely unclear about what the requirements are. It is possible that when they sign the agreement in June, there'll be a huge relief of sanctions. And when Obama speaks about snapping them back, if the Iranians are cheating, there is not a chance in the world that the Chinese or the Russians or even the Europeans are going to snap on sanctions again. We would be acting alone. We'd be completely isolated. So number one, they're going to get their economy back, and that's all they really wanted. But the second, the most astonishing thing is that in return, they are not closing a single nuclear facility. Their entire nuclear infrastructure is intact. The soundbite you showed of the president, and that was in December, no more than a year and a half ago, he talked about you don't need the Fordo facility. They are keeping it. It's not going to close. They don't need the Iraq reactor. They're going to keep it. It'll be, quote, updated. And lastly, they don't need the advanced centrifuges. They are going to be developing new ones in the Fordo reactor. So they are going to have the entire infrastructure in place either for a breakout after the agreement expires or when they have enough sanctions relief and they want to cheat and to break out on their own.
Mark.
Well, you know, that might be true, but right now I think the politics of this is that a lot of Democrats in the Senate are going to see this and say, oh, they less centrifuges than we thought they were going to let them keep. And it sounds like it's pretty robust. A little bit. This is better than a lot of the skeptics had hoped. So I think he's going to do better with his own party in Congress. I was surprised at how restrained Republicans were so far. Now, of course, they're waiting to see the details. Bob Corker said, I want to wait to see the details. Even John Boehner said, although he's concerned about the deal, he thinks Congress should not lift the sanctions until the details are examined. Well, that's kind of by definition.
From Boehner. The president says negotiators have cleared the basic threshold needed to continue the talks, he said, but the parameters for a final deal represent an alarming departure from the White House's initial goals. My longtime concerns about the parameters of this potential agreement remain, but my immediate concern is the administration signaling it will provide near-term sanctions relief. Congress must be allowed to fully review the details of any agreement before any sanctions are lifted.
Which I think they're going to get. The White House has now signaled an agreement that Congress is going to have to review this in some form. It's already started lobbying Congress pretty hard, and now that we're going to get more and more details, it's going to step up that effort. The big sanctions are not going to be lifted unless Congress feels okay.
John.
Yeah, I actually think Charles and Mara are both right. I think the actual deal, or the sort of kind of deal, to have a kind of deal with parameters of a deal, it looks like a deal, is a disaster and terrible. And it was a political success for Barack Obama because he got to come out, and basically that press conference, seen through the prism of domestic American politics, was a signal to the Democrats, you have enough here not to abandon me, not to do all of the shenanigans that you're tempted to do. And by the way, look at Robert Menendez being carted off. You know, that might send a message too. But meanwhile, the actual substance of this is disastrous. This idea that they get to keep the Fordo compound, which we've talked about before on the show, it's like Dr. Evil saying, I get to keep my death ray because I just want it for target shooting. It is ridiculous. This is a compound that no serious person denies is designed for building nuclear bombs. Moreover, the whole idea behind this from Barack Obama, which the Washington Post talks about today, lots of people talk about on background, this is supposed to be a Nixon to China thing, where Obama was going to open up Iran, create it as a force of stability in the region. It was going to be his foreign policy legacy. There's no chance that any of this leads to that.
Does this deal, as it's structured, what we know about it so far, if it ends up being this in the end in June, does it promote a nuclear arms race in the Middle East?
It'll start instantly. It'll probably started last night. The Saudis aren't going to wait with an agreement like this, and it is worse than what the skeptics had expected, Mara. Look at what was left out of all the announcements. Did you hear a word about the highly enriched uranium? Our position was it has to be exported. You did not hear a word about that. It will likely be turned into an oxide, a process which you can reverse in 2 weeks.
Yeah, they said it would be
Yeah,
diluted.
they said it would be diluted, yeah.
But it means you change it into a chemical compound that can be reversed into the uranium you need in a bomb in 2 weeks. That is not the same as shipping it out of the country where it's out of reach. Second, on the previous military dimensions, Iran had to own up to the IAEA on what it had done in the past. You didn't hear a word about it because we caved entirely on that. And last point, Obama spoke about all the great inspection. There is no provision for snap inspections to go anywhere you want. It's going to have to be arranged, and that means it will be useless.
Mark, quickly,